Hello everyone, good to see you all today. Welcome to this deep dish dialogue at the Anita Stewart Memorial Food Laboratory at the University of Guelph. My name's Simon Somogyi. I hold the Arrell Chair in the Business of Food in the Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics, which is where the laboratory is situated here today. I'm thrilled to be joined by Chef Megan Johnston of the Park Eatery in Guelph. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that the land that we are present on today is the ancestral lands of the Attawandaron people and the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. This area of the university is covered by the Dish with One Spoon covenant, which suggests that we should share the bounty of this land together, but also respectfully as well. So today's deep dish dialogue is about food prices. I'm sure most, if not all of us, have gone to a grocery store in the last 12 months and seen food prices increase rapidly. We haven't seen food price increases this great in almost 40 years. And that's put a lot of pressure on Canadian household budgets. There's numerous ways to make your food budget stretch further, and one of those is by using frozen product to replace fresh product. In a lot of cases, the frozen product can just be as nutritious as the fresh, but sometimes cheaper as well. So based on that theme, we're going to challenge Megan today to cook a dish with all the ingredients are frozen. So I'd also like to introduce Megan. So Megan is the chef de cuisine at Park Eatery at Guelph. She's worked in kitchens for over 20 years, and her menus have received numerous awards, including the Good Food Innovation Gold Awards, particularly for Food Day Canada, and she has a very loyal following. So welcome, Megan. Great to have you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So can you tell us about what you'll be making today?
Today we're going to do a pan-seared perch with miso ginger butternut squash, sautéed corn and edamame. It's going to be served with a mango vinaigrette and topped with crispy kale.
That sounds very tasty. And all the ingredients are originally from frozen sources.
Yes, everything except for, garlic, ginger, vinegar, but all the base is frozen.
So with that, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. First, we're going to take our butternut squash, and I'm going to make a ginger miso marinade. So I have my ginger, about a tablespoon of that. This is a white miso, about 3 tablespoons. I have about a tablespoon of maple syrup, a little bit of sweetness to go with that ginger. I'm going to do a pinch of salt. Rice wine vinegar. Two tablespoons of olive oil. Excuse me. And a teaspoon of sesame oil. And we're just going to mix this all up. Oh, sorry, I forgot a little touch of water here to thin it out.
So Megan, given that some of these ingredients, well, all the major ingredients are frozen, I should say, are there any barriers or problems that come along or things to take into consider when using frozen ingredients?
So if I'm using a frozen protein, typically I would thaw it ahead of time. It's gonna cook more evenly if you do that. Fruits and vegetables you can pretty much cook straight from frozen. Ideally you wanna use fruits and vegetables in something you're cooking. You don't you wouldn't thaw them and just serve them because they're going to have a different texture. But say a roasted squash would taste quite nice roasted from frozen.
And the ingredients we have here today, did you have to buy them in a specific place, or do you think they could be available from any sort of grocery store?
Everything here you'd find at any grocery store. Look at that all mixed up, and that's going to go on a baking tray and into the oven. All right, this is just set to 350 degrees. And we'll go right there. So we can do that for about 25 minutes. I'll just, excuse me, I'm sorry. Now we're just gonna make our mango vinaigrette. So I have a cup of mango, previously frozen, of course. The juice from 1 lemon. We'll do a pinch of salt. A little sweetness from maple syrup. You could use honey or sugar. I just like maple syrup. And when you're making a vinaigrette, you want to that doesn't end up everywhere. You want to add your olive oil slowly while it's blending so it emulsifies. Turn that up a little bit and turn it off, and that should be good. Basically, you just want it to thicken so it doesn't separate when it sits. So that's why you add the oil that way. And we'll just put that in a nice squeeze bottle for our presentation at the end. Okay, that's going to, I can sit there. Okay, sorry, they dance around you. Okay.
So Megan, I was going to ask, we talked about how food prices have rapidly increased over the last 12 months.
Yes.
And that's obviously hurt everyone trying to put food on their tables. How has that impacted restaurants in your experience?
It's had a huge impact on restaurants. So the price of labor, obviously we want to pay people more because they're taking a hit at home because of the increased inflation. And prices of food have gone up, especially staples like flour, canola oil, butter. These are things that are like really hard to design a menu around. So like we've increased, I'm sure everyone's seen at restaurants, there's been an increase in menu prices. Sometimes that affects people's willingness to go out and eat at restaurants.
Has it made any change to the menus you've been involved with these increased prices?
Yes, We work around it to the best of our ability. At the same time, you still need like your proteins. That's what people are coming out to eat, even though they cost a little bit more. When we were doing lockdowns, we were able to move over to like a QR code menu, and that having everything online allowed us to change things up quickly if something wasn't available or we saw a dramatic price increase. We could switch the menu within a day and work around it.
All right. And we've talked a little about the ingredients that are frozen here. Are there frozen staples that you would use in a restaurant, as not as a substitute, but as something that would be at the basis of what you're cooking?
Yeah, a lot of meats would typically come in frozen, depending on if the fresh isn't available. They'd send frozen, and it helps your shelf life. You can keep things on hand and not worry about it going bad on your shelf. And fruits, if you're baking or making sauces, it's more practical to get in large bags of frozen fruits.
Yeah, we've seen recently, and I think we've mentioned this before, that frozen produce is cheaper than, say, the fresh, and particularly as we're getting into the Canadian winter time where we can't grow particularly fruits and vegetables outside, it becomes an alternative to then getting leafy greens or particularly the corns, the carrots, the peas that you'd have to get fresh from places like in the US. But we have seen the price of frozen fruits and vegetables increase, albeit they're relatively low in comparison to the fresh. Having said that, does frozen ingredients give you a little bit more, let's say, not shelf life, but allow you to then waste less in the restaurant?
Yeah, well, exactly. Shelf life is that factor. We can take out just what we need and not have to worry about it going bad within a couple of days.
Right.
Yeah. That being said, we don't use typically a lot of frozen vegetables. But corn would be something to bring in frozen.
And you would have seen that fresh fruits and vegetables have also increased in price relatively high over the last 12 months as well in your kitchen?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The latest Stats Canada reports show that vegetable prices increased about 11% in the last 12 months, which is a little bit odd considering that we've already gone through the Canadian season, and that typically means a decrease in fruit and vegetable prices, but we haven't seen that this year. Prices have just skyrocketed, and we think the reason for that is that the lower cost of having local product has been offset by increased fuel prices, increased wages. Everything on farm is more expensive, pesticides, fertilizer, fungicides, everything that it takes to be able to grow those fruits and vegetables has gone up. And trucking, logistics expenses have also been high. So it's a tough time, but I think that there's some light at the end of the rainbow, that we're sort of seeing the worst of things when it comes to inflation.
That's good to know.
Nice. Cool. So the next step.
Okay, yes. I'm just going to check the squash because I don't want to cook this until it's closer to.
Right.
So maybe we'll just increase our temperature here. Okay. We can start sauteing our corn and edamame. I'm going to put a little olive oil in my pan. Try not to let that burn. And a touch of butter. Okay. Well, we're gonna have brown butter today for this, guys. And some salt. Oh, this off. That should be fine. I think I underestimated this induction burner. We're just going to let these cook out with a little bit of garlic, about a teaspoon of garlic. Figure out our heat. There we go. It's pretty simple. Just oil, some garlic, and we're just gonna let it cook. We can add our corn here as well. And season to taste. A little salt. So you were saying things are gonna stabilize a little bit with food costs in the future?
Yeah, predicting what the food prices will be is always a little bit of an art and a science. And the science part of it is looking at economic indicators, and the biggest ones that impact the Canadian food prices are the Canadian dollar and the price of oil. So if the Canadian dollar remains high against the US dollar, we're generally in a better position with food prices. If oil price drops, that's also a good thing. Going into a period where inflation seems to, just the data that's come out the last few days, seems to just suggest that we are getting to, say, the top of where we should be. But it makes it difficult for folks like myself who predict food prices when things like Ukraine conflict happens and you can't predict that. And it just happens, and that rapidly increased the price of oil, rapidly increased the price of fertilizers, which meant that growing food, moving food, transporting became very, very expensive. So
Right.
fingers crossed that conflicts and crises around the world subside a little bit, but all the indicators are looking as though we have hit a peak.
And some grocery stores have done a price freeze.
Yeah, we have seen Loblaws freeze the price of their no-name brands, and that will be until Christmas. That's welcome, that we're not going to see increases for particularly some of those brands or some of those products over the coming months. So those are the brands, well, that is the brand. No Name is a brand that's owned by Loblaws, so they control the price a little bit easier than, say, if it was a national brand. So that is good. The prices are already quite high, but it is good to see that there is a little bit of stability that's possibly going to happen into the coming months, particularly around Christmas time when you've got people together, people want to eat, and that can get very expensive. So, yeah, things are stabilizing a little bit. I'm happy.
Yeah. I'll just check our squash here and see where we're at. Oh, yeah, it's coming along nicely. One nice thing about the frozen vegetables is they tend to cook a little faster than fresh. So we're gonna start to get our fish going. We'll keep an eye on this one. I like to do my fish in butter. The perch is a pretty delicate fish. The butter adds like a nice rich creaminess to it. Butter obviously is a little more expensive than some oils, but
And unfortunately, butter has seen the greatest increase in food prices in any category. Depending on what province you live in, we've seen butter prices increase between 20 and 25% over the last 4 months. So that makes it very difficult to be able to use ingredients that are staples like that. Particularly if you're a baker and enjoy doing that, we need to use a lot of butter.
Right. Yes.
So it is unfortunate. The way pricing for dairy ingredients works in Canada is very different from, say, any of the other ingredients that are happening today. In that dairy is what we call a supply managed sector. Farms have to buy quota, and that quota they receive a guaranteed price. It's set by provincial marketing boards through the Canadian Dairy Commission. And so recently we've seen the Canadian Dairy Commission have increases to the farm gate price of milk and other dairy-related products, increase higher than we would normally see. So that's flown on through the food supply chain to the point where we are seeing those 20 to 25% increases.
Yeah, I have noticed it's shot up and then went down.
Right. Very different from, say, the other products where there's a relative level of stability across the country. Now, if you're in the north of Canada, or northern territories and provinces of Canada, that's typically isolated, the logistics costs are a lot higher, and that gets factored into higher food prices. But dairy has been one that has stuck out a little bit. And I suppose following on to that, Megan, all the increases in ingredient prices are going up, and margins in the restaurant are fairly slim. How do you go about trying to keep costs down? Are there any sort of techniques that you use in your kitchen?
So we try to keep waste to a minimum. Food waste is one of your biggest cost factors in a restaurant. So that's just a matter of like taking scraps and making soup stock, or taking bread ends and making breadcrumbs, and being able to repurpose things like that. And then we also track our food costs through regular inventory and food cost software. So yeah, anything that comes in, I track, and then I know where it sits. So we want to keep our products on the shelves to a minimum.
Okay. So effectively, you're maximizing the value you can get out of everything.
Yes. Okay, I'm just going to try one of these, see how they're cooked. A couple minutes. It's always good to try your food as you're cooking it. You want to taste out the seasoning. And there, our fish is going. On this pan. There we go. So this is a rice flour I'm dusting the fish in, just in case anyone's gluten sensitive. Regular flour is fine for a recipe like this, but
Does the rice flour change the texture of it, or it's just an alternative to gluten-based flour?
It can be a little crispier. It's a finer grain than a regular flour. And the flavor's a little different. This is like a glutinous sweet rice flour, so it's got a very nice flavor to it. There we go. I don't know if everyone can see that. Woo, I'll just get up and show you. You got your kind of golden brown skin, what you're looking for. A little second on that. And check our squash. Sorry, Simon. Well, that's starting to look good. pardon me, I'm just gonna set this on the tray there. Oh, sure, that would be great. Thank you. It's hard cooking in a new kitchen or you don't know where everything is. Okay. Our squash is done. Our fish is looking good. How's that corn doing?
So now that we have you here, Megan, I was interested to ask, what got you interested in becoming a chef?
Well, my first job was in a restaurant, and it was the kind of place where you made everything from scratch. So I learned the fundamentals of cooking pretty early on, and sort of developed a passion for it. I would teach myself at home, test out different recipes. These are looking good. And I cooked for money when I went to university, and when I graduated, it just seemed natural to go into the culinary world. That's where all my experience was. And I kind of worked my way up from there, mostly self-taught. We'll just put the rest of this fish here. What about you, Simon? How did you become interested in food pricing?
I'm originally from Australia, and my background was in the wine industry, which is obviously your wine. It's a big wine-producing country. So I used to work at cellar doors and at wineries, and then I got interested in why people drink one type of wine over another, and obviously food has an angle to that as well. And then I got more interested in not just why consumers want to eat or drink, but then the companies that deliver or deliver food and wine, and how they get it to us as consumers. And from there, I've done a lot of research on why people eat, how the food gets to people. And part of that involves food prices. And obviously, it's a topic I mentioned before. It's topical at this year with all the inflation issues that we've had. I've come from across the world where the cuisine is very much focused on Asia. Obviously, it's a lot closer, and the engagement with Asia is somewhat different in Asian markets. And I've done a lot of research on supply chains, food in Asia, even for Canadian produce, related to seafood, but shellfish as well. So. And the food price work, well, it flows on to, which some of you may see here, the food price report, which is going to be released on the 5th of December, where each year we predict what food prices will be. We use machine learning and artificial intelligence experiments to see what we think food prices are going to be. So keep a lookout on the 5th of December for what we think it's going to be for next year.
Hopefully there won't be any surprises next year.
We'll have to wait and see. As I mentioned before, I think we've seen the stability in price increases, and which means that the worst could be over. But we all cross our fingers that we don't see any more man-made conflicts.
Yes.
And Ukraine being the big one, doesn't drag on for too long. And that will help. So fingers crossed for some good news coming the 5th of December.
I think we're getting close here. Okay. Good. Okay. Let's put the plate together. All right.
So we have a bit of time. Do we have any questions from the audience, either here or online? Rebecca, you go first.
Yeah, so I know we actually have had a lot of online questions so far. And I might not get it totally right because I'm going off of memory here. But we had someone ask if restaurants are moving more towards using frozen food. Do you happen to know about that, Megan? And also, if anyone at home wanted to freeze food, their own food, versus just buying frozen food, do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, so I tend to buy with restaurants probably won't use more frozen food than they do now, not to my knowledge. At home, I tend to buy things in season like strawberries, strawberries, different fruits and vegetables from the farmer's market, just as and I'll freeze them and use them later in the year. So if you're freezing something like a strawberry, it's a good idea to lay it out on a tray with some parchment paper and freeze it that way, and then you can put it in a bag and you can take them out individually as opposed to having it freeze in one big clump. And that applies to most vegetables. Yeah.
Any questions here today? Yes.
This question relates a little bit to my research bacteria. So sometimes you hear about E. coli X-rays, about pathogens in vegetable oils. Has there been any research on if frozen fruit and veggies are safer on average than fresh?
Oh, that's interesting.
Not so sure. We've seen some outbreaks of E. coli in frozen berries. I think blueberries might have been the last one that we've seen. I'm not too sure of the research on that. The main E. coli outbreaks that we typically have in the produce section, it's typically with lettuce, and romaine is a good example of that. If you can picture a romaine lettuce in your head, it's almost like a thin cone, I would say, and therefore any dirt, debris, and any fertilizers can get in there, and it's hard to wash out. So those tend to be the main ones. But it's an interesting area of work that would definitely be of note to understand the differences there. Obviously, if you cook the ingredient, that's less of a problem. Berries okay if it's in some type of in baking. But if it's obviously something that's in a smoothie that's not cooked, that's going to be an issue. So it's an interesting point. Any other questions? Either here or online?
I can ask one from the online audience. So someone was curious, and I'm not sure if you know this, Simon, but what percentage of the nutritive value is retained when foods are frozen? So what are you missing out on, if anything, by using frozen, not fresh?
That's a tricky question outside of my wheelhouse. I would say that in terms of nutritional value, when we get into the winter months, when we can't rely on local produce, and if they are things like leafy greens, particularly the packaged salads, and some of the things like broccoli that have spent a long time getting to market, that the nutritional value is going to be less than, say, the frozen that have been frozen when they've been harvested. So it's a good question. I don't know the answer, but yeah, interesting to see what would be the actual outcome there. So Megan, here we are.
This is our final dish. We have the pan-seared pickerel. Kale I bought frozen, and I did it at home because it takes a little bit longer. I tossed it in a little oil, salt, and pepper and dehydrated it in my oven at about 300 degrees for an hour. I thought it would add a nice color, crunch to the dish. And we have our miso squash. I finished with the mango vinaigrette we made. I thought the mango vinaigrette would pair nicely with the fish because it adds a bit of sweetness and acidity. and our corn and edamame. Thank you.